constant in feeling. This is the price of the truth, forcing its way through all falseness which we have all created on the planet. Living fiction is very painful. Sometimes our physical body suffers. Sometimes man's inner self or his soul suffers because he has to accept and fit to the program which we have brought down 8 billion years ago. Which means we are returning to this ideal pattern, which lets a man live forever, just now through painful experience. The Earth, as well as mankind's introduction to the pattern, entered the final period of metamorphosis from the 3rd to the 4th of December 1983. This process will be finished finally in the year 2000. These last years are the time of enormous inner turbulence in mankind and in the planet, because the Earth, equally as mankind, has emotional, mental and physical bodies. The Earth has to come back to the pattern, in other words, to the spherical form. It is logical then that the Earth will undergo quakes, floods and other disasters, but not as an expression of some god's punishment, but simply as a process of coming back to the primary pattern.
Nie jako wyraz kary jakiejś boskiej, ale po prostu powracanie Ziemi do jej pierwotnego wzorca.
The Mayan calendar and many prophecies of ancient prophets and cultures predict the transition from the Dark Age into the new Golden Age to happen by the year 2011. The inscriptions of the Great Pyramid also point to the year 2011. However, time is a relative factor. During this period, mankind slowly awakens out of its sleep of thousands of years to realize the great reality that the whole universe is alive with different spiritual and material dimensions. God would never have sown a field of flowers like our universe if only one flower, our Earth, would germinate. From the year 2011 on, prophecies predict the birth of a planetary consciousness. That is, that we will recognize ourselves in one another, that we are all different, but that we are one in spirit. Then will follow 1,000 years of spiritual completion of mankind, the kingdom of peace of 1,000 years, when the masters of wisdom will appear. Until that time, not only will parts of mankind step back into the 4th and 5th dimensions, but also the cosmic fall of the Omega cycle will end. God's exhaling flows into the inhaling. The Alpha cycle commences. Everything returns to the source from which it originated. We are concluding the spiritual involution and the parallel evolution of the physical body. Our forefathers passed on this mystery in the shape of the Sphinx before they left this planet. The descending spirit of the sun, also called soul, embodied in the human beast, has experienced the crucifixion of the soul through reincarnation. After the death of the human beast, who symbolically represents the animal qualities of the human ego, man will be reborn in spirit through the completion of his ego. This crucifixion and resurrection will be experienced by many people during the following years of the apocalypse, until the planet in its entirety experiences the resurrection. After that, the marriage of heaven and earth follows. Before the Alpha cycle begins, we have a non-time, when the source itself enters into us, reconnects with us, so that we are able to feel that we are a united being. The birth of the planetary Christ and the Buddhi consciousness. The return of the Christ the return of the teachers of the worlds, the returning of the extraterrestrials, or heavenly master teachers, therefore all point towards this event, the planetary birth of the Christ consciousness, the neural webbing of mankind into a collective consciousness. However, until the conclusion of this quantum leap into the seventh dimension, the greatest changes will happen on Earth.
All great religions of today are familiar with the idea of a second coming. We Christians await the return of Jesus. The Apostle Lucas and Marcus write about it. He will be enthroned in the clouds. The Apocalypse is supposed to have been written by St. John, which is not true, because the essential passages are older than the Apostle John. In the Apocalypse, we read about the signs and plagues that will come upon humanity. A star would fall from the sky, the moon would light up, and the heavens would roll up and unfold like a manuscript. Earthquakes and false prophets would come, and man would wander about not knowing what was happening. A group of men will finally survive the second coming of the gods, the so-called Final Judgment Day. But this is not only so in the Christian community. The Muslim community is also awaiting their Mahdi and the Jews their Messiah. Overall, this thought is much older. Let us go back to Babylon and Sumer, where we find the gods Baal and Baal, which are one and the same. In Old Egypt, we obviously find the sun god Ra. All these gods have promised to return in the far future, and since that time, the belief of a second coming is kept alive. I am absolutely convinced that none of these so-called Jesus or Mahdi or whatever we may call the Messiah will appear, but that it will be a space event. If somebody does appear, which is fine with me, then it will be extraterrestrials.
With the ascension of mankind into the higher dimension of consciousness and the return of the knowledge of Atlantis and Lemuria, the purified continents of Atlantis and Lemuria will also rise out of the oceans, because human consciousness is synchronized with the planetary consciousness. Humans who have decided to open up to the higher dimensions are beginning to feel a part of an ever-increasing learning process where life is the playground. On the other hand, humans who have subconsciously decided to remain in the third dimension with their consciousness will not feel any great changes within themselves. But we will all experience the big process of purification on a planetary level, because planet Earth is straightening its spine. That is, the axis of the poles is shifting again, and along with it the climatic zones at an extremely fast pace. The shifting of the poles has already begun. New cosmic energies will then flow through the spine of the Earth, that is the axis of the poles, and be distributed across the electromagnetic field of its aura.
A pole shift can have different effects. We cannot say for sure because we have never observed it on Earth. But the fact that Earth is a gigantic magnet indicates that if it shifts its poles, the inner Earth will be slightly unbalanced.
Kann es durchaus sein, dass das Erdinnere ein wenig durcheinander kommt.
It may lead to volcanic eruptions, landmass shifts, or earthquakes, and of course tidal waves both enormous and small. Naturally, we must distinguish between the pole shift and the axis shift. Because Earth spins like a top, it is almost impossible that the axis would shift. In any case, we can't make a scientific statement about it. Theoretically, it would seem that an axis shift would be possible, but by whatever process, the Earth crust could shift and for man on Earth this would have the same effect as an axis shift. On the basis of scientific research, we can say that many such pole shifts have happened during the last 80 million years. They have occurred in a variety of frequencies. The most pole shifts we have had in 1 million years were 4, but there were also 1 million years where we only had 1 pole shift. So the frequencies of the single pole shifts are subject to fluctuations.
Das ist also in großen Schwankungen unterworfen, die Frequenz der einzelnen Polflips.
The great flood in the Bible, which is known to